You really should have looked twice before putting those handcuffs on her." The words would echo through that quiet Virginia morning long after the flashing lights disappeared. But at that exact moment, Officer Ryan Mitchell believed he was doing exactly what the badge demanded. The four-lane road outside Arlington looked almost peaceful beneath a pale spring sky, where American flags fluttered lazily outside government buildings and commuters hurried toward another ordinary weekday. Black SUVs, delivery trucks, and military personnel heading toward the Pentagon blended into the rhythm of the nation's capital, creating a scene that felt familiar to everyone who lived nearby. Standing beside a dark blue luxury SUV was a tall black woman dressed in an impeccably tailored charcoal business suit, her posture calm, her expression unreadable. She wasn't arguing. She wasn't raising her voice. She wasn't trying to explain herself beyond the simple facts Officer Mitchell refused to hear. Major General Vanessa Brooks had spent more than 3 decades serving her country. She had commanded thousands of soldiers, advised presidents, and walked through some of the most demanding situations imaginable without losing the steady discipline that defined her career. Yet on this particular morning, none of those accomplishments mattered to the young officer staring at her with growing suspicion. To him, she wasn't a decorated Army general on her way to one of the most important meetings of the year. She was simply another driver whose confidence irritated him more than it reassured him. Around them, traffic slowed. Curious drivers glanced through their windshields before pulling out their phones. A jogger across the street stopped beside a coffee stand. 2 tourists whispered quietly as they watched the unusual roadside encounter unfold only a few miles from the Pentagon itself. Vanessa remained perfectly still, her hands visible, her breathing slow and controlled. Years of military leadership had taught her that composure often carried more authority than anger ever could. Officer Mitchell interpreted that silence differently. The calmer she appeared, the more convinced he became that she was hiding something important. "License and identification," he repeated with a sharper tone, extending his hand without taking his eyes off hers. Vanessa reached slowly into her leather portfolio and handed him her driver's license along with a government credential. Mitchell barely glanced at the second card before dismissing it. "Anyone can carry a fancy-looking ID," he muttered, slipping it into his pocket without recognizing the seal stamped across its surface. Vanessa looked toward the distant skyline where the unmistakable outline of the Pentagon stood beneath the morning sun. She checked the time on her watch only once. Every passing minute carried consequences that reached far beyond this roadside stop, but she refused to mention that. Instead, she answered quietly, "Officer, I'm expected at a federal meeting. I'd appreciate the opportunity to continue once we've cleared up whatever concern you have." Mitchell folded his arms. Funny how everyone suddenly has somewhere important to be. Another patrol vehicle rolled up behind them, its emergency lights reflecting against nearby storefront windows. More people gathered along the sidewalk. Cameras appeared. Whispers spread. Still, Vanessa never protested. She simply stood with the same quiet dignity that had earned the respect of soldiers across the world, knowing something Officer Ryan Mitchell could not possibly imagine. At that very moment, a secure phone inside the Pentagon had already begun to ring. 23 minutes earlier, the morning had begun with remarkable simplicity. Major General Vanessa Brooks had left her Alexandria home before sunrise, just as she had done countless times throughout a career built on discipline rather than recognition. The air carried the crisp scent of early spring, and the quiet neighborhood was slowly awakening as porch lights switched off one by one. She preferred driving herself whenever schedules allowed because those brief moments alone gave her time to think before the weight of another demanding day settled onto her shoulders. Resting neatly on the passenger seat was a slim leather portfolio containing briefing documents prepared over months by some of the nation's brightest military planners. Every page represented countless hours of analysis focused on protecting American service members around the world. Vanessa glanced at the folder only once before returning her attention to the road. She had memorized every recommendation inside long before the documents were printed. Her destination was a secure conference inside the Pentagon, where senior military leaders would discuss decisions capable of shaping future operations for years to come. The meeting was classified, and attendance was limited to only a handful of officials whose experience had earned the government's highest trust. Yet nothing about Vanessa's appearance suggested extraordinary authority. Her charcoal suit, polished shoes, and modest pearl earrings reflected quiet professionalism instead of status. She had learned long ago that genuine leadership rarely announced itself. It revealed itself through consistency, patience, and the ability to remain calm when everyone else lost perspective. As traffic gradually increased along Interstate 395, she noticed construction crews preparing equipment, cyclists weaving carefully through intersections, and young soldiers jogging in formation outside nearby installations. The familiar sights reminded her why she had devoted her life to service. America was never defined by one office, one uniform, or one individual. It was strengthened every day by ordinary people fulfilling extraordinary responsibilities without expecting applause. Her secure government phone vibrated softly beside the portfolio. The encrypted display identified the caller as Colonel Daniel Harper, one of the officers coordinating the morning briefing. Vanessa answered through the vehicle's hands-free system. "Good morning, Colonel." His voice remained composed, though urgency lingered beneath every word. "Ma'am, the secretary has confirmed attendance. Everyone is assembling ahead of schedule. Estimated arrival." Vanessa smiled faintly. 15 minutes if traffic cooperates." "Excellent, General. We will see you shortly." The line disconnected, leaving only the quiet hum of the engine. She adjusted the navigation display even, though she knew every mile by memory. A photograph tucked inside the center console briefly caught her attention. It showed 3 generations of her family standing beneath an American flag during her promotion ceremony. Her late father had always reminded her that character was tested far more often than courage. Those words had guided every difficult decision she had ever made. Ahead, flashing patrol lights appeared near the shoulder of the highway. Vanessa slowed instinctively, as every responsible driver would. She never imagined those lights would soon redirect the course of her morning, placing decades of honorable service behind a single moment of misunderstanding. Somewhere inside the Pentagon, officials continued gathering around a secure conference table, assuming Major General Vanessa Brooks would walk through the doors exactly on time. None of them realized that only a few miles away, the person they were waiting for had just become the center of an encounter that would soon reach every level of military leadership. Officer Ryan Mitchell stepped closer with the confidence of someone who believed experience alone guaranteed good judgment. He studied the registration once more, then looked back at Vanessa Brooks as though he expected her expression to change under pressure. It never did. Her calm unsettled him more than any argument could have. Most drivers became nervous during roadside stops. Some apologized repeatedly. Others hurried to explain every detail before being asked. Vanessa did none of those things. She simply waited with quiet patience, meeting every question with respectful answers delivered in an even tone. To Mitchell, that composure looked less like confidence and more like calculation. He convinced himself that something about the situation did not fit. Behind him, Officer Ethan Collins stepped out of the second patrol vehicle, adjusting the radio clip to his shoulder. He surveyed the scene before approaching carefully. "Everything all right?" he asked. Mitchell nodded without looking away from Vanessa. "Something feels off. The identification does not add up." Collins accepted the government credential for a closer look. His eyes paused briefly on the embossed seal before shifting toward Vanessa. "Ma'am, do you work for the Department of Defense?" Vanessa answered honestly. "I do." Collins looked ready to ask another question, but Mitchell interrupted before the conversation could continue. "People claim all kinds of federal connections. We still have to verify everything." Vanessa gave a small nod. "I understand. Please verify whatever you need." Her response carried neither irritation nor sarcasm. Years in uniform had taught her that professionalism was never conditional. It existed precisely when circumstances became difficult. A delivery driver parked nearby glanced toward the growing crowd. Several pedestrians had stopped walking altogether, curiosity replacing the rush of the morning commute. Smartphones quietly appeared in a few hands. Nobody shouted. Nobody interfered. They simply watched another roadside encounter that seemed ordinary on the surface, unaware that history had a habit of hiding inside ordinary moments. Collins lowered his voice as he handed the credential back to Mitchell. "The identification looks legitimate." Mitchell frowned. "Looks legitimate is not the same as confirmed." He reached for his portable radio and requested additional verification through dispatch, carefully reading every number printed across the credential. Seconds passed, then another minute. Static filled the silence before dispatch responded that the database required higher authorization to access the restricted record. Mitchell interpreted the incomplete response as further evidence that something was wrong. Vanessa recognized exactly what had happened. Certain military records could not be viewed through ordinary law enforcement systems. She had encountered similar situations during joint security exercises many years before. Still, she chose not to explain. Every unnecessary word risked sounding defensive, and she refused to allow frustration to replace discipline. A gentle breeze carried the distant sound of aircraft approaching Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport. Vanessa briefly lifted her eyes toward the sky before returning her attention to the officers. Somewhere beyond, those clouds, soldiers trained, pilots prepared missions, and thousands of service members carried out responsibilities without expecting anyone to know their names. She thought about them instead of herself. Meanwhile, inside a secure operations center less than 5 miles away, a scheduling officer glanced at the conference room clock for the third time. Major General Vanessa Brooks had never arrived late to a classified briefing. Not once. The delay lasted only a few minutes. Yet experienced leaders understood that unusual delays often signaled unusual problems. Without hesitation, the officer reached for a secure telephone and initiated a protocol that almost never needed to be used. The atmosphere shifted almost imperceptibly, the way the air changes before a summer storm reaches the horizon. Officer Ryan Mitchell folded his notebook and looked directly at Vanessa Brooks. "Until we receive full verification, you are not free to leave." His voice carried the certainty of someone convinced that procedure alone justified every decision. Vanessa acknowledged him with a slight nod. "I understand your position, officer. I only ask that you contact the Pentagon duty office. They can confirm my identity immediately." Mitchell let out a quiet breath that sounded closer to skepticism than consideration. Everyone suddenly knows someone important when questions start. Ethan Collins glanced uneasily between them. "Ryan, maybe we should make that call first." Mitchell shook his head. Dispatch is already checking the information. He believed waiting for ordinary channels was enough. He never considered that ordinary channels were never designed to verify extraordinary responsibilities. More vehicles slowed along the curb as passing drivers noticed the growing police presence. A local television traffic helicopter drifted across the distant skyline, its shadow briefly sweeping over the highway before disappearing toward downtown Washington. People standing near a coffee shop exchanged quiet whispers while several commuters discreetly recorded the encounter on their phones. None of them recognized the woman standing beside the dark blue sport utility vehicle. To them, she looked like a composed professional enduring an unusually long traffic stop. Vanessa remained remarkably calm despite the growing audience. She had spent years addressing military academies, congressional committees, and international defense conferences. Public attention had never intimidated her because she understood that true leadership required emotional discipline before anything else. She folded her hands lightly in front of her and waited without complaint. Her patience only deepened Mitchell's suspicion. He stepped toward the vehicle and looked through the windows. On the rear seat rested the leather portfolio containing classified briefing materials secured inside an encrypted case. Beside it sat a military service cap protected inside a garment bag. Neither item attracted his attention because he was focused on proving his original assumption rather than questioning it. Collins quietly studied the government credential again. The gold lettering, embedded security markings, and Department of Defense seal all appeared authentic. "Ryan," he said carefully, "this identification has multiple federal security features. We should probably slow down until someone from Defense responds." Mitchell answered without hesitation, "Or someone spent a lot of effort making it look convincing." Vanessa finally spoke again, her voice steady and respectful. "Officer Mitchell, I have no intention of leaving. I will cooperate completely. But every minute matters today for reasons that extend far beyond me." Mitchell crossed his arms. "That sounds dramatic." She simply replied, "It is factual." Those 4 words lingered in the silence that followed. Several people watching from across the street noticed her remarkable composure. One elderly Army veteran standing outside the coffee shop quietly removed his cap and narrowed his eyes. Something about the way she carried herself felt unmistakably familiar. He had seen that posture before during ceremonies attended by senior military leaders. Before he could say anything, another secure phone began ringing inside the Pentagon. This time it was not answered by an assistant or scheduler. It was routed directly to Lieutenant General Marcus Hale, the officer responsible for chairing the classified morning briefing. As he listened to the brief report that Major General Vanessa Brooks had failed to arrive and could no longer be reached through secure channels, his expression changed instantly. Without saying another word, he stood from the conference table and ordered an immediate status check, setting in motion a response that would reach far beyond an ordinary roadside stop. Lieutenant General Marcus Hale did not waste a single second. Years of command had taught him that unexplained silence from a senior officer was never something to dismiss. He walked to the secure communications station as every conversation inside the conference room came to an immediate stop. Around the polished table sat civilian defense officials, senior commanders, and intelligence advisors, all waiting for one person whose absence suddenly carried more weight than anyone had anticipated. "Try her secure line again," Hale instructed calmly. The communications officer nodded and initiated another encrypted connection. Several seconds passed before the same automated response appeared. The secure device could not establish a protected link. Hale frowned. That should have been impossible. Major General Vanessa Brooks never disabled her secure communications during official travel. She followed protocol with absolute precision because she had helped write portions of that protocol herself. "Check her motorcade status," Hale continued. Another officer searched the transportation schedule before looking back with visible confusion. "Sir, General Brooks declined an escort this morning. She was driving herself directly from Alexandria." The room fell unusually quiet. One civilian advisor slowly lowered his reading glasses. "She has never missed a classified briefing," Hale answered without hesitation. "Exactly." Back outside, Vanessa Brooks remained standing beside her vehicle while traffic continued flowing around the roadside stop. Officer Ryan Mitchell checked his watch with growing impatience. Dispatch still had no definitive answer. Every response repeated the same frustrating message that access to the government credential required authorization beyond local systems. Instead of questioning the limitation, Mitchell interpreted it as another reason to remain suspicious. Ethan Collins quietly stepped closer to Vanessa. "Ma'am, may I ask one question?" She nodded. "Of course." Collins lowered his voice. "If someone from the Department of Defense called right now, would they know exactly where you were supposed to be?" Vanessa answered with complete honesty. "Yes, they are probably looking for me already." Collins felt a knot form in his stomach. There was no panic in her voice, no attempt to impress him, only quiet certainty. Before he could respond, Mitchell spoke sharply from several feet away. "Collins." The younger officer turned immediately. "Stay focused." Collins simply nodded, but his confidence in the situation had begun to change. Across the street, the elderly Army veteran finally recognized something that had been bothering him since he first saw Vanessa. It was not her face. It was the small cluster of campaign ribbons displayed on a framed photograph that had appeared briefly inside the open vehicle when Mitchell inspected the interior. The veteran had seen those exact ribbons worn only by officers who had served at the highest levels of command. He quietly removed his phone and searched military news articles from the previous month. After only a few moments, his eyes widened. He compared the official photograph on the screen with the composed woman standing beside the highway. The resemblance was unmistakable. He looked toward the officers, hesitated, then began walking carefully across the sidewalk. At the very same moment, inside the Pentagon, another communications specialist rushed into the conference room carrying a printed report. "Sir," she said, handing it directly to Lieutenant General Hale, "we found her last confirmed location." Hale scanned the page once before his expression hardened. The coordinates pointed to a roadside stop less than 10 minutes from the Pentagon. Every person around the table immediately understood what that meant. Hale reached for the red secure telephone reserved for priority communications and spoke only one sentence before ending the call. "Connect me to the Arlington Police Chief immediately." Officer Ryan Mitchell had no idea that events far beyond the roadside had already begun moving faster than he could imagine. He was still waiting for another response from dispatch when the radio clipped to his shoulder crackled with unusual urgency. Unit 12, stand by for incoming command traffic. Mitchell pressed the transmit button. Unit 12 receiving. Before another word could be exchanged, the channel fell silent. It was not static. It was deliberate. Someone higher in the chain had taken control of the frequency. Mitchell exchanged a puzzled glance with Ethan Collins, who quietly lowered his own radio. They had never heard communications handled this way during an ordinary traffic stop. Vanessa Brooks noticed the subtle change immediately, but remained completely still. Her eyes drifted toward the distant outline of the Pentagon, standing against the clear Virginia sky less than 5 miles away. She knew exactly what had happened. Someone had finally realized she was missing. Across the street, the retired Army veteran reached the officers with cautious respect. "Excuse me, officers," he said politely. "I believe you may want to take another look at her identification." Mitchell barely turned his head. "Sir, this is an active investigation. Please remain behind the sidewalk." The veteran hesitated before holding up his phone. Displayed on the screen was an official Department of Defense news release featuring a photograph taken only weeks earlier during a military ceremony. Standing beside the Secretary of the Army was Major General Vanessa Brooks, wearing the same calm expression and unmistakable smile, now visible only a few yards away. Collins instinctively leaned closer to the photograph. His heartbeat quickened. The resemblance was impossible to ignore. "Ryan," he began quietly. Mitchell interrupted without even looking. "Pictures on the internet do not prove identity." The veteran slowly lowered his phone, disappointment replacing confidence. Vanessa said nothing. She neither confirmed nor denied the photograph because she understood something that many people never learned. Truth did not become stronger by repeating itself. It simply waited until others were willing to recognize it. At that exact moment, Arlington Police Chief Daniel Mercer was walking briskly through headquarters after receiving a secure transfer from the Pentagon. His administrative assistant had never seen him move so quickly. Mercer picked up the encrypted line. "Chief Mercer speaking." Lieutenant General Marcus Hale answered immediately. His voice remained calm, but every word carried unmistakable authority. "Chief, I need confirmation regarding one of your traffic stops currently taking place near Interstate 395. Mercer frowned. "Go ahead." Hale continued. "The individual involved is Major General Vanessa Brooks, United States Army. She is carrying active Department of Defense credentials and classified briefing materials. She was scheduled to attend a secure Pentagon meeting 22 minutes ago. I need to know why she has not arrived." Chief Mercer stopped walking. The hallway around him suddenly felt silent despite the constant activity inside headquarters. "General Brooks?" he repeated carefully. "That is correct," Hale answered. "And Chief, time is now a matter of national importance." Mercer immediately signaled his communications supervisor. "Patch me through to Unit 12 now." Back on the roadside, Mitchell's radio suddenly came alive again, this time with a tone reserved for direct command communications. Every nearby officer recognized it instantly. Collins looked toward Mitchell. The crowd fell unusually quiet. Even the passing traffic seemed to fade into the background. Mitchell reached for the microphone with complete confidence, never imagining that the voice about to speak would change everything he believed he understood about the woman standing patiently before him. The radio remained silent for one long heartbeat before a firm voice cut through the air with unmistakable authority. "Unit 12, this is Police Chief Daniel Mercer." Officer Mitchell acknowledged immediately. Ryan Mitchell straightened instinctively and lifted the microphone. "Unit 12 receiving, Chief." Every conversation around the roadside stopped. Even the small crowd watching from the sidewalk sensed that something important was unfolding. Chief Mercer did not waste a single word. "Officer Mitchell, I need you to answer one question. Is the individual currently with you identified as Vanessa Brooks?" Mitchell glanced toward the composed woman standing beside the dark blue sport utility vehicle. "Affirmative, Chief. That is the name on the identification provided." There was a brief pause, followed by words that instantly drained the confidence from his expression. "Officer, the individual you are speaking with is Major General Vanessa Brooks of the United States Army. Her credentials have been verified directly through the Department of Defense. She is currently overdue for a classified Pentagon briefing attended by senior military leadership." Mitchell blinked, convinced he had misunderstood. "Chief, Did you say Major General? I did, Mercer answered without hesitation. You are to return every credential immediately, treat General Brooks with full professional courtesy, and await further instructions. Do not delay her any longer than absolutely necessary. Ryan slowly lowered the microphone. The certainty that had carried him through the entire encounter disappeared almost instantly. Ethan Collins looked toward Vanessa, then back at his partner, finally understanding why every answer she had given had been delivered with such quiet confidence. Vanessa remained exactly as she had been from the beginning. She did not smile. She did not express frustration. She simply waited with the same calm dignity that had defined every moment of the morning. The retired Army veteran quietly removed his cap again, this time with unmistakable respect. Several people recording the encounter exchanged surprised glances as whispers spread through the growing crowd. She really is a general. Did you hear what the chief said? She was going to the Pentagon. Mitchell carefully removed the government credential from his pocket and looked at it again. For the first time, he actually read every line instead of searching for reasons to doubt it. The Department of Defense seal. The security, markings, the rank. Every detail had been in front of him from the very beginning. He had simply failed to see it. Before anyone could speak again, the distant sound of approaching vehicles echoed along the highway. Heads turned toward the northbound lanes as 3 black government sport utility vehicles entered the exit ramp in perfect formation. Their emergency lights flashed silently behind the windshield instead of on the roof, the kind of discreet escort normally reserved for senior federal officials. They came to a smooth stop a short distance away. Uniformed military personnel stepped out first, followed by 2 senior officers wearing dress uniforms. Without hesitation, both officers walked directly toward Vanessa Brooks. As soon as they reached her, they came to attention and offered a crisp military salute. "Good morning, General Brooks," the older officer said respectfully. "Lieutenant General Hale asked us to escort you to the Pentagon immediately. He requested that we inform you the briefing has been delayed until your arrival." No one on the roadside spoke. Officer Mitchell stood completely still as the full weight of the morning settled over him. The woman he had questioned with such confidence was not simply an important government employee. She was one of the nation's senior military leaders, and the Pentagon itself had postponed a classified meeting because they had been waiting for her. The military officer stepped aside as Major General Vanessa Brooks accepted her credential with the same composed expression she had worn throughout the entire encounter. She carefully placed the identification back inside her leather portfolio before turning toward Officer Ryan Mitchell. For a brief moment, neither of them spoke. The silence felt heavier than any argument ever could. Mitchell looked as though he wanted to explain every decision he had made, but the words never came. General Brooks simply offered a respectful nod, acknowledging him as another public servant wearing a different uniform. There was no anger in her face. There was no satisfaction, only quiet disappointment. Lieutenant General Marcus Hale stepped out of the lead government vehicle. Moments later, his commanding presence immediately drew every eye along the roadside. He walked directly toward General Brooks, saluted, and spoke in a calm voice. "General, the secretary asked me to ensure you are all right before we proceed." Vanessa returned the salute. "I appreciate the concern. I am fine. Let us continue with today's mission." Hale nodded once before turning toward Chief Daniel Mercer, who had just arrived after driving from headquarters. The 2 leaders exchanged a firm handshake. Mercer spoke first. "General Brooks, on behalf of this department, I sincerely apologize for what occurred this morning. We will conduct a complete review of every decision made during this encounter." Vanessa answered quietly, "Chief, accountability protects public trust. That matters more than apologies." Those words stayed with everyone who heard them. Mercer immediately instructed his command staff to preserve every piece of available evidence connected to the stop. Body camera recordings would be secured. Radio communications would be reviewed. Dispatch logs would be examined minute by minute. Every decision would be measured against departmental policy and professional standards. The purpose was not revenge. It was responsibility. Officer Ethan Collins stood several feet away, reflecting on the small moments that had almost changed the outcome. He remembered suggesting another verification. He remembered noticing the security markings on the credential. He also realized how easily assumptions could become stronger than facts when people stopped asking careful questions. Ryan Mitchell remained silent. Watching senior military leaders greet Vanessa with obvious respect forced him to confront something far more uncomfortable than public embarrassment. Every official confirmation had existed from the very beginning. Every opportunity to pause, verify, and reconsider had been available. Yet certainty had replaced curiosity, and assumptions had replaced patience. Across the street, several bystanders slowly lowered their phones. What had begun as an ordinary roadside stop had transformed into something much larger. Parents quietly explained the situation to their children. The retired Army veteran smiled with quiet pride as he watched General Brooks walk toward the waiting government vehicle. He had served under remarkable leaders during his own military career, and he recognized one standing before him now. Before entering the vehicle, Vanessa paused one final time and looked back toward the officers. "Every badge represents public trust," she said gently. "Every uniform carries responsibility. We honor both when we allow facts to speak before assumptions do." No one answered because nothing needed to be added. As the convoy departed toward the Pentagon, the flashing lights disappeared into the morning traffic. Behind them, an ordinary stretch of Virginia highway remained exactly where it had always been, but everyone who had witnessed the encounter understood that they had just seen something far more significant than a delayed meeting. They had witnessed how dignity could remain unshaken, how truth required no raised voice, and how the strongest form of authority often revealed itself through calm restraint rather than power alone. Later that afternoon, the classified briefing concluded behind the secure walls of the Pentagon. But the events from that quiet Virginia highway continued to travel through every level of leadership. The operational plans discussed inside the conference room would remain confidential, yet the lesson learned outside those walls belonged to everyone. Chief Daniel Mercer personally initiated an independent review, not because anyone demanded headlines or public attention, but because confidence in public service depended on accountability. Training supervisors examined communication records, body camera footage, dispatch timelines, and verification procedures with one objective in mind: ensuring that future decisions would be guided by careful judgment instead of assumptions. Officer Ethan Collins participated fully in the review, determined to learn from every moment that had unfolded before him. He understood that professionalism sometimes meant asking one more question, making one more phone call, or taking one more minute before reaching a conclusion. Ryan Mitchell also cooperated with the process. For the first time since earning his badge, he recognized that confidence without humility could become its own blind spot. He had believed he was protecting the public, yet somewhere along the way he had stopped allowing facts to challenge his first impression. That realization weighed far more heavily than any formal investigation ever could. Across town, Major General Vanessa Brooks returned to her duties exactly as she always had. She requested no public statement, no ceremony, and no special recognition. When a senior aide asked whether she wished to file a personal complaint, she answered with the same quiet conviction that had carried her through the entire day. "I want better decisions, not bigger headlines." Those simple words reflected the kind of leadership that could never be measured by rank alone. Weeks later, Arlington Police Department introduced additional training emphasizing verification, impartial decision-making, and respectful communication during every public encounter. Veteran officers shared the story with new recruits, not as a tale of embarrassment, but as a reminder that every person deserved to be seen before being judged. The retired Army veteran who had witnessed the encounter often returned to the same neighborhood coffee shop. Whenever the conversation turned toward public service, he remembered the woman who never raised her voice, never demanded respect, and never allowed frustration to replace dignity. He would quietly tell people that the strongest leaders were usually the calmest ones in the room. Somewhere inside the Pentagon, General Brooks continued guiding soldiers whose names would never appear in newspapers, making decisions that protected people she would never meet. The morning on the highway became nothing more than another page in a lifetime dedicated to service, yet its meaning reached much further than one delayed meeting. It reminded everyone who heard the story that uniforms may differ, titles may change, and authority may carry many forms, but character is revealed in the moments when no one expects kindness, patience, a restraint. The badge earned respect through integrity. The uniform earned honor through service. Neither stood above the truth. As the sun disappeared beyond the Washington skyline that evening, the lesson remained long after the flashing lights had faded. Real authority is never proven by the power to stop another person. It is proven by the wisdom to recognize their humanity before making a judgment, because the strongest leaders do not ask the world to notice their rank. They simply give the world a reason to trust their character.